Thank you all for taking the time to join Al and I today to allow us to share our experience of the migration of the MOT testing service to Amazon Web Services. Bit of background, I'm a Kainos technical architect. I've been with Kainos for about 10 years now, and I've been working closely with central government for the past 4. I also lead the Kainos Web Operations capability, who strive to deliver secure, robust, performing platforms for government departments and ultimately their users. To give you a bit of background about the actual MOT testing service, it's quite a large digital service in its own right. It actually has upwards on 70,000 active users at any one time, and it has about 20,000 locations across the country. So it's it expands. It goes across the full expanse of the UK. It processes about 30 million transactions per annum. So it's got quite a high throughput. It's as you expect. It's very much a 9 to 5, but the reality is the service is 24/7 and does still have workload through the early hours of the morning. It underpins car tax online. So for the DVLA, any car that they wish to issue tax to, they actually make a call to the MOT service to ensure that it fundamentally has a valid MOT. The old or legacy, as I refer to it throughout MOT testing service, effectively becomes end of life, or was becoming end of life on the 23rd of September 2015, and there was simply no option or available to extend beyond that. It had been running for, I think it was close to 10 years, and by the time we could turn it off, so it was legacy technology that could no longer be maintained. With the movement of the new service, there was 100% channel shift achieved. So that was about bringing everyone across from the old legacy platform to the new digital service by the date of the 23rd. And the benefits are not only to the end garages in terms of how they interface with the service and have a more on-demand, modern experience, but also in the terms of running it. The running costs are significantly reduced using a commodity cloud platform in the shape of Amazon Web Service, and it also provides a baseline upon which further functional updates can be made to actually help meet the user needs of the service. So, DVSA are on a digital journey. So MOT is their first big step in it. It's their flagship service. They do lots of other things, but that is kind of the core of what it is they deliver. So it's now in its beta to live phase. I will talk a bit more about in detail as to what that meant in terms of getting to there and how the actual migration to AWS was part of that transition and the tight scanning skills that were involved. There's a new backlog of feature and defects and re-architecting to be taken forward. So the first step to move into AWS was to create a platform upon which to continue iteration and build out. We're working to create a new service design process.
I'm back now, if you want me to pick up. Sorry about that.
Cool. Go ahead, Alan.
Okay. Yeah, so sorry about that. I had some connection problems there. So as you said, Gareth, DVSA are on a digital journey, and the MOT service is now in the beta to live phase. So when we discovered the backlog for that beta to live phase, we looked to identify what features and defects needed to be remediated and move it based on user needs and data towards a successful live digital by default assessment. And within that journey, we needed to re-architect certain elements of the service as well. So we'll be refactoring the API layer and the database layer of the application to cope with the capacity and demand of the service going forward. We're introducing a new service design process, and that was a really important step in qualifying and sizing and prioritizing that backlog. So everything that we do is based on insights from data, legacy data and analytics from the live service and user needs. So that's consistently applied, and our aspiration is to move here to a continuous delivery model so we can deliver change quickly and safely, and we're calling that our WebOps 2 phase. So we will be moving to 3 availability zones on Amazon with that and building in high level of resilience to the service. It is a business critical service for DVSA and for government indeed. Another one of our goals on the digital journey for MOT is to build sustainable capability to operate and improve the service. So that's really important. We have vendor capability at the moment to deliver the backlog. We're looking to run that backlog down and then bring in permanent staff to take it forward into a continuous improvement phase. So that will correlate with our live service assessment, and when we do that, we'll be looking to have sustainable capability in-house, an agile team to operate and improve the service. The last piece we're doing currently is developing an Agile Governance framework, so that's to underpin the delivery and assurance of the service. That's recognizing that we need a higher level of assurance at a portfolio level across our digital services and delivery activity, and that we need to change some of the ways that the things have been done historically to take account of agile software delivery process and continuous delivery processes. So much faster feedback loops, and I'll talk about that as we move on.
So first up, we have a quick poll, and it's just about understanding whereabouts you are on your cloud journey. So, are you on migrating legacy applications to cloud platforms? Are you looking for more cost-effective options than already using cloud, but you're looking at public cloud platforms? Are you building new digital services on cloud platforms? Or are you starting to basically research before settling on a preferred approach? So we'll give everyone a few minutes, a few moments to answer, and then we'll have a look at the outcome. So we'll give it 5 more seconds, and then we'll close the poll and move forwards. So interestingly, there's a broad range, but there's still a heavy preference or heavy bias towards the researching cloud options. But it's interesting to see that everyone is moving on a cloud journey in some shape, form, or direction, and that you're actively pursuing. So before we get into the hows and wherefores and the actual what we did underneath, there was undoubtedly migration challenges in terms of trying to deliver it within the 10 weeks, and the biggest challenge that the group faced was timelines. So 10 weeks was a big ask in terms of being able to take the service across to Amazon Web Services. There was a hard and fast date, both the legacy service had to be switched off. So that was really driving direction, and there was a lot of ground to cover and not much time to do it within. To complete the migration, we had to take a different approach to infrastructure. We didn't have 9 months to procure, design, build a platform to deliver the live service. We had to look at a different way to meet the timelines. Following on from timescales, the other aspect that we're challenged around was performance. And let me kind of quantify that a bit. The challenge being able to deliver the user needs of the service was going to be difficult in terms of performance, and the reason being is that the legacy MOT testing service was accessed via fixed terminals in the garages, and each garage typically entered their MOTs in a serial fashion. So they may have 4 mechanics working at any one time, but they only had one terminal in which they could input data. So things were very serial, and that almost created almost a bottleneck, kind of a way to smooth the load. The new service was on demand, so any internet-connected device could be used to connect. So the garages, in theory, could equip their people with any device and let them work in a new way. So you may have 5 people in one garage submitting tests simultaneously, which is bringing a different load on the system. I'm going to touch quickly on the data classification. So until recently, and until we undertook this process, moving official data to the AWS public cloud was seen in the past as deemed no-go. So we had to challenge that and understand, is that still valid? Coming off the back of the classification of data was also the logistics of actually transferring the data. So migrating the data from the legacy service into the new service in AWS was again going to be a challenge. The figure was around 1 terabyte, so it wasn't a huge data set. But the key challenge was that it had to be fully up to date at the point of cutover and when any garage started to use the new service. So MOT1, the legacy service, and MOT2, the new digital service, ran in parallel, and guys were moved across on a scheduled basis to use the new service. And when they moved to MOT2, they stopped using the old service. But the challenge existed whereby if a citizen went to a garage, had their car MOT'd, and they used MOT1, and the car failed for whatever reason, and that recorded the reasons. The next day they went to another garage to have the repair done, and they were using MOT2. So there needed to be a record for that vehicle so that they could just have a retest. Otherwise, it was there was no history of it. So that was a challenge. PSN connectivity was an obvious challenge in that AWS are not PSN connected, and there's a reliance obviously for the migration activities to move the data from the legacy service to use PSN, but more importantly the interface with our PSN services. So it's described, DVLA uses as part of their day-to-day operations to effectively validate the MOTs before taxing cars. And last but not least was the accreditation process. To formally run the service, it needed to be accredited. And the precise timelines and iterative approach we used in the form of agile infrastructure made this a moving target. So in terms of accreditation, we needed to look at new ways as a group to satisfy that the service was being built to the proper controls to be able to effectively accredit and run as a live service. So now on to our second poll, and this is just again building upon what we talked about earlier. So everyone was using cloud, but which cloud platforms are you using specifically for production and live services? So we'll leave the poll running for a few moments, and again we'll look at the output and see what people are doing in the space. Okay, so we'll close the poll off in the next 5 seconds. Excellent. So I'm actually slightly surprised at the level of use of public cloud. It's much higher than I expected. I had expected the results that actually a lot of things would be using clouds, community clouds built for government. So it's good to see that the people are already out there actively adopting it and trying to use public cloud platforms. So I kind of described earlier, we had to deliver in a faster, more iterative way. We didn't have 9 months. So as part of agile infrastructure, automation is absolutely core to being able to deliver the transition to AWS in 10 weeks. We reused battle-hardened, proven code from other government services that we worked upon, and enabled delivery in an agile way that the team could rapidly provision and recreate infrastructure based on the results from rigorous continual testing. And that's something I'll touch on in a bit more detail later. Within 3 weeks, we had a first version of the MOT service running in the AWS cloud, and that was only made possible by the automation that we had baked in. Being able to automate things is fantastic and provides the flexibility to do things quickly and reliably. The next step is to figure out which building blocks to use, and which size images, which Amazon Web Services should we avail of. Should we use ELBs? Should we be using S3 for elements? How should our networks look? By building the infrastructure in an agile way, backed up by testing, we're able to make decisions based on facts. Again, do we use our own Memcache service, or do we actually use Elasticache provided by AWS? Again, in terms of load balancing, do you look at ELB? Do we look at HA proxy? And how we actually could wrap using our agile infrastructure the proper security controls around it, no matter what actual underlying service was to be used. And without the ability to automate and with the right building blocks, scaling isn't possible. And in terms of scaling, one size does not fit all. So being able to decide what metrics and scaling policies will be built around, or whether you follow a schedule, it is tailored to the actual service that is being delivered. And I'm not afraid to admit, the reality is that no matter what anyone tells you, scaling is difficult. Those that make it look seamless have put a lot of effort into achieving the feat. With Amazon Web Services, it was very easy to scale out, in, up, down in terms of infrastructure building blocks, but to do so in an intelligent way took a lot of testing and validation to prove. And the key lesson we took during those 10 weeks was to prove scaling in principle before even looking at auto scaling. So actually prove how to scale in an intelligent way each layer or component of the MOT service. Iteration was core to what we did, not only for infrastructure but across the piece. And to allow us to iterate, we established a deployment pipeline. And the pipeline was a series of production-like environments that allowed us to take features from development right the way through to production quickly and reliably using the automation tooling. The pipeline had built into automated checks and balances to test both functional and non-functional aspects of the service. If these didn't pass, you couldn't move through the pipeline. But again, as described earlier, the goal of the pipeline was to create a thin slice through to production and not just to focus on one environment. So establish the pipeline as an entity from development right through to production and then iterate upon that. Consistency was key to what we did, and we quite simply just laid down a ground rule and think about how your code will run in production. We placed the same rigors of control to the development environments and subsequent downstream environments as we did for production, resulted in everyone working with the mindset of delivering production-ready code. The very same code that ran in development, including the managing of infrastructure, the supporting of services, like monitoring, logging, were identical in every way to production. And this built confidence in what we did. We iterated a lot, and it seemed like sometimes we're changing direction lots of times and too often almost. But the ability to be able to create confidence and deliver updates through production was core to our success. And once we had a new feature or bug fix available, we were able to push that through production in a controlled and robust way. The more we do, the better we become, and the more we improve the pipeline and the supporting automation to tailor it to the MOT testing service. Getting those fixes through quickly gave us a meaningful feedback to understand if we had actually moved forward or regressed. One key thing in iteration and the pipeline was the ability, what our pipeline was, to not only not to discriminate between migration and development, because if we had it done, we would have been able to A, either migrate, or B, provide the functionality to actually enable the switch off of the legacy service. So the pipeline was able to push updates from development and from those supporting migration activities during this same release through the pipeline. So the pipeline created a way to create change regardless of purpose. And kind of on the last piece on iteration was the fix fast mantra. Given the short duration, we didn't have. There's always going to be challenges and teething issues, and we didn't have time to wait to try and resolve these things. So we used our deployment pipeline to full effect, delivering features and fixes to production as soon as they were ready. The pipeline enabled us to diagnose, fix, test, and validate in a swift manner. And we typically aim to get our fixes through to production within 24 hours and to get real feedback on what it is we were doing. So moving on to our third point, and it's in the same vein as iteration, is on average, how frequently are you able to release updates to your services? So we'll leave this run for a moment as before, and we'll have a look at the results. So we'll leave the poll for maybe another 5 seconds, and then when we close. So we've quite a broad range of answers, and the reality is that everyone knows the challenges, being able to certainly get to a daily release cycle. And the goal is always to do things as quickly as possible, and it's interesting to see that lots of people are obviously pushing heavily towards more regular releases in terms of weekly and daily updates. So in terms of, I want to talk a bit about monitoring, and service transparency was core to delivering this digital service. Without knowing exactly how the network, application, data, and underlying infrastructure is performing, it's not possible to make informed decisions, and we didn't have time to guess. We provided a ready-made first-class performance and health monitoring to allow better understanding of the MOT service. Core to our monitoring service was just capturing and aggregating logs in a secure, centralized location where the team could query and interrogate directly or via dashboards in the office. We built the dashboards to provide overall response times, so we understood how the end user was experiencing the system. Was it slow, fast? To get a broad feel as to how the service would appear. We then created dashboards that gives a breakdown into how each component or layer was performing. And we could use the measures to understand what needed to scale and when and where bottlenecks would exist. And I'll touch on that topic a bit more in a moment. Not only did we look at throughput and health of the service as a whole, we also measured the output of the service, which in this case was MOTs completed. And we graphed this on a per minute basis. And the figure would prove key to us to understanding how the service was performing. Large deviations in this figure typically meant there was a problem. So it gave us early insight as to if a component or a service was underperforming in any way. The monitoring was easily extendable, and we found the additional figures. So we were able to put in figures for last week and yesterday, so we could actually understand trends and could actually use that to inform decisions in terms of how we would scale as well. We also captured figures along MOT tests completed, so we could actually use again those to understand which are the busiest days of the week, which are the busiest months of the year, and understand how much actual throughput the service is achieving. And finally, we measured how users were interacting with the service. From numbers to most common activities to where they were struggling in the MOT journey, we could feed that back into the iterative agile design process. Again, real-world information guiding business decisions. So, at the outset, we weren't just building a production service or just migrating a service. We had to build a performance-proven production service, and we had to change our mindset slightly on how we could do that in such a short period of time. We didn't know exactly the actual usage profile that would occur from this platform. We knew that the old legacy service was artificially throttled by the fact most garages only had a single terminal, and with this new digital service, that throttle was removed. And we looked at historical information and tried to identify trends and understand what the peak loads could be if everyone decided to use the service at once and use it as a true on-demand. The important thing here is we challenge ourselves and the application of cloud infrastructure, and we learned important lessons as part of this. The result of challenging ourselves and aiming for those peak figures meant the new service handled seasonally high demand from the garages in September, justifying our decisions. Nothing quite tastes like real data or live data. No matter how well synthetic data is created or cared for, it's never quite the same. Therefore, live data was used to validate the performance of the platform. We worked closely with the information assurance team to ensure that we implemented appropriate controls to allow us to test against the real thing, as it were. And we continue to test continually. As part of our deployment pipeline and the path to production, we tested each and every update based on a simulated peak load to understand had we improved, regressed as a result of changes were made. As I described earlier, we were making lots of changes to functionally, part of the migration, as part of infrastructure tweaking and changes. So there's a lot of change. It was this approach that allowed the platform and application to be performance optimized. We knew the state of the MOT testing service at any point in time based on that snapshot. We understood where we stood in terms of capacity. We prioritized and spent significant time throughout analyzing the output of results to understand and optimize performance bottlenecks. AWS support were fantastic throughout this process. They took the time to not only provide insight into how their infrastructure building blocks were performing, but also offer suggestions, inputs into the application space and how we could better do things to better set ourselves to the Amazon platform. One such example was elastic load balancers. We worked closely with Amazon to actually create a policy that met the usage profile of the MOT testing service. It had the service itself each morning had a very, very steep uptake, and we had to tune the scaling policy effectively for our load balancers to be able to cope with that demand. And the benefit of Agile delivery and the continual testing validation service is that increased senior DVSA stakeholder confidence that the service will be delivered successfully to garages in an operationally ready state. The platform provided a way to continually validate the service and keep the confidence in a controlled pace of change. And kind of one of the last sort of technical areas I want to speak about just at the moment is in and around security. And a lot of you face similar challenges as you move to using public cloud platforms. The MOT testing service data was classified as official, and that's likely to be the case for significant amounts of other government data that each of you will no doubt be dealing with at the moment. The old thinking of official data not being allowed to host in AWS is incorrect, and the reality is that the senior information risk owner and departmental accreditor have the power to accept risk and the controls that they feel are required to mitigate the risk. AWS themselves created a white paper about how to align the usage of their platform to CSG cloud best practices, which we align the platform to. Amazon, in reality, are the market-leading infrastructure service provider and take security and their commercial practices seriously. And it's these practices that make Amazon an option in this space. And Amazon provide access to those practices via a non-disclosure agreement. So in the case of DVSA, this insight was eye-opening. And at the level Amazon go to, it was more than enough to assure the risk owners that AWS are an organization that could be trusted with the MOT data. Amazon are not yet PSN connected. So we needed to find another way to connect the MOT testing service to the PSN. And the only transport option available to us in the timelines was public internet. So VPN seemed like the most logical solution. So we reached out to CSG to discuss how we'd achieve connectivity to the PSN, yet not break any code of connection. So Kainos DVSA and CSG worked collaboratively together to create a secure VPN solution, which terminated in a PSN-connected cloud provider. In this case, it was a Skyscape. The VPN provided us the mechanism to support the migration of legacy data into RDS using MySQL replication, but also to carry out the key business as usual activities with the DVLA, where the DVLA could query the MOT dataset to ensure a vehicle had a valid MOT before issuing tax. We approached our security and information assurance in an agile way too. We worked collaboratively with the DVSA insurance team and the Department for Transfer Creditor, and we met daily to ensure appropriate controls were implemented and validated, and we created what we described as a minimal viable documentation set that we could iterate on throughout the migration and into the future, and not just leave it all to the end, which would make accreditation very difficult. The approach to this is the documentation of daily stand-ups. We give early insight into the emerging service and prioritize the next activities that needed to be completed to assure the delivery. Another point to note was that after AWS shared under NDA the controls that they had across the AWS cloud, the risk assessment accreditation and accreditation piece focused more heavily on the build of the MOT testing service and become a more traditional accreditation exercise as it was with the old PGA accreditations of cloud providers. Whereby the infrastructure were almost given a ticket and a certificate to say, yes, this is good to use. And the same was true with AWS when they released what they did onto the bonnet. And given the rate of change and the iteration, it was important to have independent evaluation done throughout the exercise. That was not only to validate our own testing in terms of security, but also to ensure that information assurance team had also another way to benchmark, say, collectively, even with all this change, we're all moving forward in a controlled manner. The end result was a highly secure service delivered in the timelines needed, and the service had a clean bill of health in terms of vulnerability assessment, paving the way to allow the service to switch over to happen. So I'm going to pass you across to Alan, who's going to take you through Agile Governance.
Thanks, Gareth. So, to underpin the delivery of the service and the rate of change that we needed to achieve with this, we started to develop an Agile Governance framework, iterating some of the legacy governance mechanisms that we had in the agency to take account of Agile delivery in much faster change cycles. So we had some key principles to underpin that framework, and they're closely aligned with the digital by default principles. So you'd be looking at things like producing working output software, in this case, quickly and safely. So that's about blending the right capability, governance, assurance, and leadership to develop the benefits. Not slowing down delivery, so that's really important, particularly when you have a high cost in relative terms aligned with the delivery. So you'd be looking for fast feedback without sacrificing assurance. Decisions when they're needed at the right level, and that's about having evidence-based decisions, so empowered service management and delivery management within the project, and to be able to manage risk and change efficiently and quickly. Delivery of the right people and vendors, so joining up the DVSA stakeholders that we had, so digital services and technology, business change, and the service group with the right vendor capability, so multi-vendor blended teams delivering the output. And then showing the thing broadly, it's really important to follow the Agile ceremonies, and the show and tell is a key ceremony there. So we needed to get in front of the teams and get the teams engaged and doing sprint review and show and tell work face-to-face where possible with all the key stakeholders to pull them into the cycle. And we're looking to extend that out onto a portfolio level now within the agency, and only doing things if they add value. So that's a really important principle, setting the vision, setting the minimum viable product, and tracking the benefits against those deliveries, and basing that on a sound understanding of data and user needs, and having an iterative approach then to delivering output. And then trust and verify, so quality, tracking quality, value, benefits, and having a smooth transition from delivery phases into live service phases. So we're applying this at a portfolio level now. So really the MVP was in the early beta to live stages of MOT, and I'm looking to build a scalable digital by default geared assurance framework across the digital portfolio here. We'll be tracking delivery, spend, and quality, and we'll be developing new artifacts as well, aligned to Agile delivery to align with those things. So I think we've moved on probably there in slide terms. Can we skip back there, Gareth?
Yeah, sorry, I'll...
That's okay, no worries. So yeah, we'll be developing new artifacts to track the key metrics that we'll have, and everything then is geared around a service design process that's based on understanding user needs and understanding insights from data. So that could be legacy data or live analytics from the service. So we do 2 stages of discovery now within the service design model we have. So we do a service discovery up front, and then we do epic discovery too. And we take a view on individual epics around prioritization and sizing based on a value matrix, and that gives us a consistent framework really for prioritizing the work that we do. We're really pushing having fast feedback cycles in the agency to be able to assure and accept outputs in sprint where possible, doing functional and non-functional testing and representative assurance in sprint, and accommodating controlled change broadly in an iterative approach to that. And finally, we'll be looking to define and measure benefits iteratively. So this is quite a big shift for the agency from a waterfall model where we'd be looking to have a very exhaustive set of requirements up front and exhaustive planning and traditional Gantt chart type approach with a lot of fairly generic benefits in some cases attached to that. Now, at discovery level, we'll be looking to identify high-level benefits. So for MOT, for example, we'll be looking to retire the legacy service and make a significant OPEX saving as a result of that. And as we move through the phases, alpha and into beta, then we'd be adding more detail to that, eventually arriving at a point where we're tracking benefit almost sprint by sprint. So that framework is being applied across the portfolio. We can skip on now to the next slide. Another thing that we're doing, and it's a key feature in the beta to live journey, is to build sustainable capability to operate and improve our digital services. So again, starting with MOT as the MVP, we're looking to recruit and enable a digital team. And the approach we're taking there is to go through a recruitment exercise, so trying to attract high quality candidates, both from within the agency and civil service and externally. And then we'll be enabling those candidates, so we'll be placing them alongside the vendor teams that we have for a period of time, operating the same software delivery life cycle and processes and governance framework that we operate with the vendors. And then we'd look to make those individuals prime within those teams at such time as they're ready, and keep the vendors running in parallel with them. Finally then, after a period of them running prime, we'd be looking to exit the vendor and move on to an in-house CI model. So there's a significant investment benefit in running that kind of model. Generally, vendor teams are in the order of 3 times the cost of an in-house team. We need to work really hard to attract and retain the right talent as well. So we're not able to always pay the best levels for some of these roles, particularly in some of the more difficult areas like delivery management, web operations engineers, and service design, some of those more niche roles and capabilities. So we need to really sell the benefits of working for the civil service and sell the interest of the work that we're doing and the development opportunities that it exposes people to downstream. So that's something that I feel that GDS did very successfully. And then we mitigate potential challenges in terms of matching pay with the interest of the work. So in that enabling and mentoring period, we're giving these people skills and experience that can be invaluable for them downstream. And we're also looking at alternative approaches as well if we're unable to hire suitably experienced permanent candidates, where we take in apprenticeships, we take in graduates, and we look at fast stream as well. And we take people maybe before they're ready to take the prime, and we invest a little bit more in them, and we get a good output, and we have those people then for longer. That's the successful trade-off with that kind of model. So enabling DVSA is a key success measure for our vendors. We build that in so they're incentivized to do it. They understand, and we have clarity and transparency around the measures that we're putting in place. I'll say a few words now about the service cutover. So a lot of things happened fairly late in the process on the delivery of MOT, running up to the legacy switch-off milestone that we had, which was a hard deadline. So we had a very aggressive channel shift plan. Traditionally, the model would be that you would effect channel shift while running a public beta service alongside a legacy service, running in parallel and do a controlled transition from one to the other. We weren't able to do that with MOT, and we had a very big audience in excess of 70,000 users in over 20,000 different sites, a mix of sort of sole trader, small garages with limited users, right up to big enterprise clients like QuickFit and Halfords and some of those agencies. So it was a very challenging thing to plan and manage. And in terms of migrating those users while they were using a live service with an ongoing data migration, there are a lot of challenges there too. So the approach that we took was to benchmark how many users we could migrate on a daily basis, because there was processing and data migration overhead. So we were exporting these people in batch from the legacy services and then bringing them in through an automated process to MOT2, the new digital service. So that figured about 1,000 per day during the week and about 3,000 per day at the weekend. So 3,500, I think, was the most that we did on Sunday. And we had a very aggressive timeline to do that, in the region of around 6 weeks, I think it was, end to end. So there were a lot of communication challenges in terms of planning and execution and early life support of those people once migrated. But we got that process down to quite a fine art pretty quickly, and it worked really well. It was a very successful transition. As Gareth mentioned earlier, we were in a beta state fairly early on with an aggressive channel shift, so we had some issues and defects that needed remediating, but we had an active comms and user research cycle with our users, and we prioritized and managed those defects quite successfully. So we view the service cutover as a big success on the back of a very aggressive timeline to build the AWS pipeline.
So I'm just going to cover off some of the so the benefits that the platform brought, and what it brought was a faster agile hosting pattern that was not exclusively tied to MOT testing service. So a pattern that could be used with the broad portfolio of digital services. And one example of that is MOT history, where DVSA publish the historical MOT information of vehicles to citizens. Not only does the platform allow for a pay-as-you-go usage aligned to your demand, but with the provided ready-made operational services, there's significant cost savings to be made there. And again, we wouldn't be able to hit those timelines without having those ready available services. The platform again delivered, for service transparency, a reusable first-class monitoring suite, which again can be used by DVSA to extend forward for other services that they choose to deliver, and they can avail of the same level of in-depth detail that they can with MOT. It reduced the risk of deployment. So the establishment of the deployment pipeline created a fully controlled and automated means to deliver updates to production and to actually help the end users by fixing their problems sooner. Again, the service has built into the platform, built into a proactive alerting and remediation in response to business critical incidents. So those things that are effectively impacting the end users are flagged and either automatically remedied via the automation piece or flagged up to the support team to be able to take action. And finally, the platform was designed in line with the CSG 2014 security classifications, so it's capable of continuing to support other official data-backed services. So kind of onto our final poll there, and I suppose it's more of a question: do you currently have or do you plan to build a platform for building digital services? So we'll leave the poll open for maybe another 5 seconds, and then we'll close it off. So interestingly, we have a 50-50 break between. So it's interesting that some are decided to go out and build a platform, and others are then maybe not at this stage. But it's interesting nonetheless. And in terms of the DVSA, the platform that was created was key to be able to move forward and again continue with their digital vision.
So I'll say a few words now, Gareth, what's next for DVSA in digital terms. So we're going to continue our service and business transformation journey. We're going to bring more services into digital division. We're going to build sustainable capability along the lines that I described, typically in the beta to live phase, and we'll be looking to hand off then live services to that in-house capability in a continuous improvement type model. We'll be embedding our Agile Governance principles and framework at a portfolio level, so following the model of going from project and MVP in the project and scaling it up then to a portfolio level. We're scaling Agile delivery as well across portfolio level, so bringing in more vendor capability and delivery capability to deliver the outcomes and value that we've identified. We'll be building an enterprise architecture in line within DS&T to replace some of our legacy hosting and architecture. So we'll be looking to MVP elements of that architecture within the projects that we deliver, the transformation project, so that we get an early sight of some of those components. It's really important to do that, I think, at the front end, serving real user needs rather than doing it at the back end and looking to integrate with it later. And we'll be continuing to work with GDS to adopt governance of platform services. So we're starting on MOT with Notify and Pay, and we'll be looking to integrate those things in such a way that we can use them strategically as products for other services. And we'll continue to work with DVLA and DFT to deliver synergies across the agencies where we can on services and data and value ultimately for our customers.
So to harness the power of cloud to deliver digital services can be difficult and time consuming, and the Elastic Cloud platform provides ready-made services which can be tailored to the needs of your users and departments, which rapidly reduces the build time, just like we achieved with DVSA. At its core, it's a group of building blocks spanning automation, deployment, monitoring, alerting, performance validation, all delivered in a secure way, and it's all ready to deliver a portfolio of digital services. So if you want to find out more, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll share details in just a moment. So now it's over to you, and if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and send them through. So just looking at the first question here, I'll read it back. everyone says that moving to AWS is really difficult to move back, and the first year in AWS is cheaper, hence why people move, but it gets more expensive. What commercial insight can you share? So typically what I find is that in moving towards AWS, it's making informed decisions about what you do in terms of perceived lock-in. So it's, if you use an AWS services, it's when you make that an AWS service, make the decision that yes, you're doing it, but understand what you would do if you had to move back again. What's your option? Are you using something you simply don't have a cheap or a viable alternative? And the other piece as well in terms of cost is that typically costs can spiral. But that's typically, people normally start out with doing smaller projects, research development, and then they push some of the bigger services on. And the bigger services typically take more to run in terms of performance and storage. So costs can go up, but it's important that, and that's why automation is key here, that it allows you to actually make sure that you make best use of what it is you're doing, and you don't end up with server sprawl. Because Amazon is effectively, it is infinite in some respects, and it becomes easy to just keep continuing to provision things and incur costs that don't add value. Just looking at a very straightforward question. So what modern systems were used and automated? So we used a suite of monitoring tools. So Prometheus was our core monitoring tool, and it's a fairly new tool, open source, but it plays nicely with not only the services that we were using, but it also integrates well with AWS, so we could have a single pane understanding as to what was going on both in the application space, but also in AWS as well. It gives us that aggregated view, and it's a fairly modern product. It's fairly straightforward to automate. It's built to live in a cloud platform that's not always going to be there in terms of scaling in and out and failure. So it's a fairly straightforward thing to automate. On top of Prometheus, we also used Kibana to actually aggregate our logs. We aggregate our logs using Elasticsearch, and then we're able to view those in dashboards throughout the office. And we actually had some of those dashboards and images I showed you earlier dotted throughout the office, and you actually found people going to them to see what was going on and how the service was performing daily. So I think of time for one more question. What was the single biggest takeaway lesson you learned from the migration exercise? The single biggest lesson that I learned, and certainly in the 10 weeks, was to aim to establish your deployment pipeline early and have a thin slice all the way through to your production environment, and then iterate upon that. And release little and often, and then measure and analyze the results. Try not to build the final thing up front. Build the minimum viable, and then continue to iterate and develop that forwards. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to come out to listen to myself and Alan today, and let us share our experience with you. If you have any questions, the contact details are there. Please drop an email or on Twitter, and we'll be in contact. Thank you.